All right, everybody. I'm not going to mention any names, but there's a dude. I assume he's a dude. I don't know. Doesn't matter. There's a tweeter that tweeted an opinion regarding Resident Evil 4 Remake. Now, let's just to jump straight into it. If you haven't played Resident Evil 4 Remake, and by that I mean the demo, not the normal game, the fact that retailers have broken street date and people have gotten their copies of the actual game early is a totally separate issue. I'm not going to talk about it because it happens with every game. There's nothing you can do about it besides get pissed off and block people on social media. So I mean specifically, if you haven't played the RE4 Chainsaw demo, it's been out for 2 days. It's on every platform. Obviously, it's free because it's a demo. So you can download it and play for yourself and see what this is all about. In the RE4 remake, Capcom has opted to make changes. Obviously, the change that we're concerned about with this video revolves entirely around breakable objects. This isn't new for Resident Evil 4 Remake. It's actually been in every single modern RE engine game since and including Resident Evil 7. You encounter it literally within like a minute. Well, I don't know, like 5 minutes of the game starting as soon as you get in the house. When you first see the, I think it's like a fuse box or something. There's something that you have to cut open and it has red tape on it. And that requires a knife. So that's been in the series now for 6 years. It's clearly not going away. Essentially now, in every single new Resident Evil game, every breakable object has yellow tape all over it or yellow paint. Even some objects that aren't breakable but are interactive have like a yellow piece of tape or some yellow paint or otherwise clearly some kind of texture that indicates to the player that, hey, this object is interactive. Almost every single object. That obviously excludes things like typewriters or computers, stuff like that. Like some of them aren't super obvious, but a lot of them are. Like the computer in the the computer in the STARS office in RE2 remake, there isn't like a yellow sticker on it or something. Like it's not completely obvious. Neither is the keypad in the evidence room, or a lot of stuff for that matter. But like for instance, in RE2 remake, every single one of the spare boards that you can use to board up a window has a big piece of yellow tape on it. In the main lobby, that fuse box or whatever it is, the control box to open the west side shutter of the building has yellow tape on it, and you have to cut that with a knife that you get from Marvin, I think. RE8 has them, of course. Whether it's like the windmill when you're turning that crank to do whatever, to climb up on the windmill, I think. Or boxes that you can break open, or like walls that you can climb over, or whatever. It's all over the place. And so, of course, now Resident Evil 4 Remake has that same game design principle in it. So, like, every box that you can break has a big, obvious yellow paint or yellow tape on it. There's one spot in the village center in the demo, and I'm sure it'll be in the normal game. There's one spot where there's like a ledge, but you can't get up there in the demo because you need a second person to boost you up. So I assume you can go back there with Ashley later on. There's a spot on the wall where there's obvious yellow paint right on the ledge that you can climb onto. And I'm sure there will be plenty more examples. So the argument is that it's unnecessary, it's stupid, it'd be I didn't see people make that argument necessarily, but it also insults the intelligence of the player to just splash yellow paint or have tape everywhere on interactive objects. It's completely unnecessary, and the arguments that I've seen in favor of it are so incredibly stupid. And the guy that tweeted this today tweeted like another tweet, and he's like, oh boy, I've ruined my Twitter reputation with this paint tweet. And then all these fucking idiots are commenting like, oh, it's okay, everyone has a bad take now and again. It's not a bad take. That's the thing. It's literally not a bad take. And if you disagree, you're wrong. It may come as a surprise to a lot of RE4 fans, but there were actually 7 Resident Evil games before Resident Evil 4 came out. All of these games existed without having blatant yellow markings and shit on them to tell the player what to do. And in fact, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6, all were also designed on the same principles where they didn't tell you what to do. Resident Evil 5 was a bit more obvious because, like, if there was a partner jump where you had to press B or a partner door, they were clearly like the ladders were red, and they all had the same like caution tape kind of crap, like blowing in the wind attached to the rungs of the ladder. Or if it was a door, it was red, and all those doors have the exact same design. It has infinite eggs. I don't remember 100% on Resident Evil 6, but I do believe it was pretty much the same. Like, if there was anything that needed a partner, or it was something out of the ordinary, it was a specific color. So I've seen people argue, and I really can't fathom why people are arguing in support of dumbing things down, but that's the world we live in now in 2023, where everyone is just a fucking idiot, and they're proud of it. Every argument I've seen that remotely makes sense is that maybe people haven't played a video game before. And honestly, that's just stupid. Like, if you're trying to appeal to people that haven't played a video game before, they're not going to respect your game for holding their hand the entire way. They're probably going to get bored and say it's easy, to be honest, and they're not even going to play more than 10 minutes of it. And it's not just the fact that Resident Evil 4 Remake is doing it, because, as I said, it's now an established game design principle in this series. Ever since they switched to RE Engine, every single game in RE Engine has been like this, so now it's normal, unfortunately. It's not the fact that Resident Evil is doing it, because they have been doing it. It's the fact that every game is doing it. This shit has been in games. This specific exact design principle has been in games since at least 2012, potentially even earlier than that. I think Uncharted 1 may have done the same kind of thing where, like, all the ledges were... Yeah, actually, yeah, it did. Like, interactive ledges were obviously a different color that didn't necessarily even match the texture that it was on. Tomb Raider 2013 did it, and all the Tomb Raiders after that. Uncharted 4 did it, and so every Uncharted between 1 and 4 has done it, including Lost Legacy, Star Wars Fallen Order, Dying Light 2, Sniper Elite 4, Sniper Elite 5, and countless others. I really can't think of every game that's done it. Oh, Mad Max was really bad about it, where just every ledge that you can climb is very obvious. Like, it has a specific color of paint. It's either going to be white or yellow. Many games don't go as far as Resident Evil 4 Remake is going, because it's usually just a ledge that has some obvious different color on it. But a lot of these games now are even Resident Evil 4 Remake and the previous RE Engine games are going as far as like almost every interactive object doing it. Like I said. So it's just stupid. Like gamers don't need to be told where to go, or literally every ledge they can climb on, or whatever. Objective markers or like generic direction arrows are one thing, but to literally highlight every single object that the player should or must interact with is just next level garbage game design. And again, for anyone who would be pedantic about it, this is not the first time that Capcom is guilty of doing this in Resident Evil specifically. Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 Remake held your hand almost every single step of the way. In Resident Evil 3 Remake, especially in the hospital section when you start playing as Carlos, but even when you go back to playing as Jill, not only is there yellow tape around all the broken glass that goes through the courtyards or whatever they're called, but they literally even have the doors that you have to go through, like highlight. I don't want to say highlighted, it's not highlighted, but framed in yellow. So there's several doors in the hospital that just literally have a yellow outline around the door frame, the same exact color as the yellow tape. And again, it would be fine if it was one thing or the other. Yeah, that's the problem, is that all the RE Engine games, not just RE4 Remake, again, this isn't new. People aren't suddenly complaining about it. It's been an issue for years. All of the RE Engine games hold your hand so much that it's a complete bastardization of what Resident Evil used to be and should be. Every single interactive object, like I said, whether it's a door, a typewriter, a computer, an ammo box, a hand grenade, a quest item, a safe, a healing item, literally everything that can be interacted with, even if it doesn't have a highlight, even if it's not glowing. Again, in RE Engine specifically, has a little symbol above it with an arrow pointing down directly at the object in case you possibly could have missed it somehow. If somehow in the depths of someone's imagination you possibly could have not noticed this item, there's already an arrow pointing at it. So the argument that I've seen, and it just gets more and more ridiculous each time I see this conversation. I've reached a whole new level of disgust today just from seeing this conversation for like 10 minutes on Twitter with new replies. The argument I've seen from these people is that only, literally, one of these people is a community manager for Capcom, like a Capcom Europe community manager. I don't know what that means necessarily, like if it means they're an employee. And if it does mean they're an employee, they honestly should be fired, and they should probably just never talk again. I understand that's probably their job as community manager, to be on Twitter and engage with fans, but clearly they're wrong. Their take is shit, and it's the reason it's shit is funny in a ironic way, not in a ha-ha way, because this person literally accused anyone that doesn't agree with this design principle as being ableist, more or less. The exact wording was, and I quote verbatim, "From a quality of life standpoint, I don't see why a non-disabled person would want there to be no indication of which items can and can't be broken, since there's loads of crates and boxes around and everything is photorealistic. Do we really want to play a guessing game of Whack-a-Box?" First of all, the game is not photorealistic. If you can't tell the difference between real life lighting and photography and the assets in this game, you really should just sign out now and not play the game. Do everyone a favor because you're clearly insane. There's no valid argument that the textures in this game are photorealistic. Okay, they look good, sure. Photorealistic? No, nope, nope. Sorry, just nope, nope. There's no photogrammetry going on here in this game. Even the Resident Evil 4 HD project, which literally used photogrammetry and was photorealistic, still doesn't look photorealistic because it was in the Cryware engine, and that was 18 years ago. There's only so much that lighting engine can do, even in the HD remaster. So again, just no. To the rest of that question, why I don't see why a non-disabled person it doesn't even make sense why a non-disabled person would want there to not be an indication of which items can and can't be broken, because there's no need for one. And again, let me circle back. Not only are all of the breakable boxes covered in giant fucking yellow X's or giant tape or whatever, there's also the exact same arrow I just mentioned earlier. This time it's white for whatever reason. I guess that's easier to see for people than black. So now there's a big white circle floating above all the objects with a downwards arrow pointing at the object. So that will undoubtedly apply to like ammo and stuff in items that are sitting on tables instead of having been dropped from an enemy. The third stupid question here being, again, do we really want to play against a game of Whack-A-Box? Well, if you're older than 15, even so, I'm sure 15-year-olds or younger could have played the original Resident Evil games. Like I said, all 7 of the original Resident Evil games did not have this kind of trash design that holds the player's hand. The entire gameplay loop of a Resident Evil game, because let me be clear, Resident Evil is an action-adventure game. Survival horror is a subgenre of action-adventure. It's not its own genre. It's a subgenre. Okay, so in all of the Resident Evil games, the core gameplay revolved around you moving through an environment and having to solve puzzles by interacting with objects in order to move forward. So here's the thing. I think I already said it, actually. The first 7 Resident Evil games did not do this. In the original Resident Evil games, if you wanted or needed to find an item, you found it yourself. And the reason you could find it easily is because we used to refer to the items as shinies back in the 90s. Because what you do is you go in the room and then you mash the use button on a wall or whatever, on a bookshelf or on a desk, until you find an item. Or until you notice the item and you mash the button until it actually picks up the item. So like there's in the sewers in Resident Evil 2, when you go down that ladder in the dark ass room with all the shelves, you have to light the oil lamp with Leon's lighter. There's a shiny on one of the shelves. I don't remember what it is, but even in the dark you can see this thing shining. And every item in those games that was actually interactive was noticeably a different color than the background, because the backgrounds were pre-rendered and the items themselves were actually 3D models, so they were rendered with a different lighting style, because that's just literally how the technology worked. You couldn't render both things at once, otherwise the item would be part of the background and it wouldn't stand out and it wouldn't be interactive. So like when you picked it up, you would still see it on the background, unless they did a transition where they replaced the existing pre-rendered background with one that was missing the item. You understand what I'm saying? Resident Evil 4, the original, is the same way. Even though it's fully 3D, you can clearly see what items can be broken and what can't, because they... And I can't believe I even have to explain this, But I assure you, I have seen people that literally don't understand this concept. That's what we're dealing with. You can tell what items are breakable and what aren't in the original game in multiple ways. First of all, they have a few different models. So you've got like pine wood boxes of different sizes, okay? And you've got big round barrels that, and I like to joke about this, have been in every game between Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 8. And they're even in the Resident Evil 4 Remake, except they're different now. So you got big round barrels that you can break open. You've got these pine wood boxes. And then you've also got like treasure chests that are obviously a slightly different color or like slightly differently lit than everything else in the game world.
Follow me.
And then on top of that, when enemies drop items, in the original, there was a big freaking like GTA objective marker sticking out, or I'm sorry, surrounding them and like, you know, strobing up into the sky. So it's literally impossible to miss items that are interactive in Resident Evil 4 specifically. So to go this far is just absolutely ridiculous. It's totally unnecessary. And they even included the items still have a bright like beacon sticking out of the top of them. It's just smaller, but you can still see it from across the level almost. You know, as far as your machine can render, you can still see the item pickups. So it's not really different than the original in that regard. Just slightly less obnoxious. And I'm not arguing against having like the yellow paint and the yellow tape at all. I'm just arguing against the fact that it's mandatory. It's a part of the design and there's nothing you can do about it. I would be perfectly okay with this being in the game, and really the previous games too. The reason people care about it with RE4 Remake is because RE4 has exponentially more breakable items than the previous games did. In the previous games, basically, like if you were going to pick up a box of ammo or something, it was either blatantly obvious that like you could see it sitting on a desk or something, or you just ran up to a cabinet and, like the originals or to play any other survival horror game at the time, you just ran up to the environment and you just press buttons to see what would happen. And if you found a magazine full of bullets, or you found a box of ammo or whatever, then awesome, like that was the shit. You found something. So they don't need to do this. I've seen people argue if they wanted to put this in the game, that's fine. But it should have been off by default, and it should be an accessibility option in the settings menus where you can turn on like whatever you want to call it. Object guides or something like that. It should absolutely be an accessibility option, and it should be turned off by default, but it should be there for people who want it. And that's how all games should be designed going forward, is if you want to cater to people that don't actually play video games, then that's fine, but give everyone an option. Don't force everyone to play this dumbed down version of a game. Another argument I've seen is that the reason they did it this way is because the textures are so realistic or whatever, which is nonsensical. I've seen the argument that otherwise you wouldn't be able to differentiate the interactive objects between the ones that aren't interactive, and that's stupid. It's blatantly obvious if you actually play the games which ones are interactive and which aren't. So going back to when I mentioned the original RE4 barrel, those are in the game everywhere, but it's clear that you can't interact with them because they are usually just like in a pile of crap, like a pile of other boxes that wouldn't make any sense to be able to break, because otherwise, like after you break them, the entire environment would be empty. And another argument against having the yellow crap the yellow markers. Not only is there a yellow marker, but as soon as you get within range of an object, it throws a button prompt up on the screen, like every game made in the past 20 years has always done. If you get anywhere near an interactive object, it tosses a button prompt on the screen. You know, it's like press A to use this fuse box, press A to use this switch, press A to interact with this item, press A to pick this up. That's literally been in video games for over 20 years. So I don't know why that wasn't enough for these people, but apparently they need more. So I just want to say, as a older, increasingly grumpier gamer, that this is just absolutely ridiculous. Now, I'm not saying it's like a deal breaker that anyone should not buy the game because of it. I mean, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. I perfectly understand, you know, standing up for your principles. Like, no, this game is designed for toddlers. I won't buy it. That's fine. I feel that way most of the time, and then I just decide to do it anyway. But that's 2023. That's where we're at now as a society. People that point things out logically get chastised and shit on by people that don't know what they're talking about, by people that were born like 5 years after the original game came out, people that have never played the originals, people with no actual frame of reference for anything. So that's 2023, and that's Resident Evil 4 Remake and its stupid yellow paint obsession. At one point, one of these people mentioned bear traps. He said, I don't see them praising those trickier bear traps with no yellow anywhere. If you haven't played the original Resident Evil 4, there is literally one area in the entire game that has quote-unquote tricky bear traps. There's an area with a bunch of bear traps really close to each other, so your only real option is to either like shoot a few of them so that you form a safe pattern to walk through the bear traps, or you can just shoot all of them if you have the ammo to waste. There's nothing tricky about that. Literally nothing tricky whatsoever. The bear traps, like every other object that's interactive, are easily noticeable unless they're covered by something or you're not looking. There's no way that you can avoid seeing the bear traps, and that still applies to the remake so far. From what everyone has seen in the demo, there's one bear trap that you can step on, and it's easily noticeable even though it is like half obscured by vegetation. You don't need yellow to see that, so what's the problem? And then there's this ridiculous argument that everything in the game won't be as bright as the demo, even though half of the demo was almost like pitch black. It took place inside buildings with very little light. Even when you got outside, like there wasn't any light really until you got to the actual village center. So they're arguing like, oh, later on in the game where it's darker, the yellow stuff will make it easier to see. Not really, because you'll have a flashlight. So you don't need yellow tape because you have a flashlight, and there will be lights regardless. I don't even need to see any of the leaked gameplay or anything to know that. It's just a stupid argument. So this is going to be way too long if I don't shut up. So let me just try to wrap it up. There's been a trend in game design to not just hold the player's hand, but literally lift them up and carry them throughout the game. And it's not just Resident Evil. It is a lot of games. Uncharted 1, for example, literally has a journal that tells you the puzzle solutions. It doesn't I mean, obviously, it's not like the journal doesn't start playing a YouTube video and show you what to do, okay? But unless you are the stupidest person in the history of time, you just look at the journal and it'll be like 1 through 4, and it'll show symbols of which things need to be pressed in which order, or which statues need to be facing which direction or whatever. It's like there's no thought whatsoever involved, and if there is, it's because some of the symbols are a little bit vague and they kind of look the same. Again, every RE Engine game, Resident Evil game does this. Every single door that you have to go through has that circle floating above it telling you that you need to press, the button, or that you need to interact with this door. And it does so from 10 feet away. And in some spots, it's extremely ridiculous because you can see like 16 arrows all crammed up against each other. The argument here isn't necessarily that it's unrealistic or that it's not as immersive. It's that it's completely asinine. And on top of being asinine, there's no option to turn it off. It's default game design, so it's not an accessibility option. You have to deal with everything being totally slattered in yellow paint and yellow tape. And the other really extremely stupid argument I've seen is that I keep seeing this. People keep regurgitating this crap even though it's patently, objectively false. They keep saying that the boxes in Resident Evil 4 were glowing. They literally weren't glowing. They did not glow. Okay? And to wit, if you take a look yet again at this, like this computer screen in the RPD is literally flashing. Okay? That's exactly how all of the Resident Evil games worked until Resident Evil. Even Resident Evil 4 kind of had the original stuff in it. So you had to find items and then use them to solve puzzles, and then solving the puzzles would net you more items, and then those items would, they would be keys or whatever the hell you needed to do to move forward. You didn't just move forward naturally, like that's how the game played. It was Metroidvania, okay? You had to actually unlock the next area. So like in Resident Evil 4, even the original Resident Evil 4, you still had that gameplay to a different extent. Like that one area up in the mountains or whatever, where you first meet the merchant and you get to snipe all those dudes. You have to find 2 pieces of a hexagonal crest that you put into the door, and then it unlocks the big double doors, and then you can continue on. Otherwise, you're stuck there. The only thing you can do is hang around that area or go back towards the village or the lake or whatever. So again, it's not new. The entire point of these games is that you had to look around to find items in order to play. That included ammo, that included keys, that included ink ribbons or jewels or whatever pieces of multi-piece puzzles, like that statue where you have to combine the book in the hand in Resident Evil 2 Remake up on the second floor east wing. That has always been the gameplay. So if that wasn't ridiculous enough, at this point, I've literally seen these people argue against the very concept of game mechanics, because that's what it boils down to. They're arguing against the concept of having to learn how to play a game. If you look at the original Resident Evil 4, and really any of the Resident Evil games, again, the argument is that people are claiming it's not immersive because of photorealistic textures, like they need to do something different. That's absolutely untrue. If you look at Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 8, the interactive objects are very plainly noticeable without having to slather them with orange or yellow shit or red tape or whatever. You can tell because just like Resident Evil 4, just like Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, the lighting on the interactive objects is actually distinct enough from everything around it that you can tell that it's interactive. You don't need
Give me the herb. Shoot me.
signs that say shoot me or yellow tape or anything like that. Because again, even if it didn't have the arrow floating above everything, you can still plainly see the items are lit differently.
To put in his hands. I'm not gonna do it. They have a lot of.
Even Resident Evil 2 has the puzzle solution notebook that you get at the very beginning of the game, which almost literally tells you the solution to everything. It's about as vague as the ones in Uncharted, so it's pretty much equivalent. And they didn't need to do that either. Now, the Resident Evil puzzles are a bit more trial and error because so many of them are literally just like sliders where you have to choose the right symbols. And there's like, 90 combinations or whatever. So, yeah, it's a little bit unrealistic to expect people to just blindly try to go through 27 different combinations. In fact, there is at least one puzzle where you literally get an item that straight up tells you the answer, but it's still hand-holding. To answer that question, the third point on that tweet from earlier, you can see in this first clip that the barrel that is breakable, even though it does have the yellow stuff on it, there's one right next to it in the back that's clearly lit differently, so it's a different shade of whatever, a different shade of grayish brownish, which clearly you can't break it. And if you could, when you got close enough to the breakable barrel, you would also see an interact thing, and you don't. And then the second one of these barrels is outside the house at the very beginning. Clearly you can't break it because there's no interactive thing popping up over it. Again, there would be some kind of interaction and the lighting on the barrel would be noticeable. So these people are acting like it's fucking Donkey Kong. Like you're just fucking dodging barrels left and right, and that's obviously stupid as hell. It's not like you're gonna run through the game and just constantly be stepping over or stepping around barrels. There's only so many barrels and boxes in the game. I think I focused far too much on specific details in separate games. The point here, like I said, is that people are genuinely arguing against the very concept of game mechanics itself. The responses I've seen, I've even looked back in doing research for this video. I've looked back at previous games and like previous people that have posted stuff on this subject, and it's the same stupid arguments made against them too. Like there was a guy that posted a picture of some area from Dying Light 2, and it obviously it has like 6 or 7 yellow ledges. I think it's an elevator shaft, and he said basically it's hand holding, and it's annoying that he tried to find a way to disable the yellow paint ledges, and all he could find was like options for changing the color grading for colorblind people. And so of course, because unsurprisingly, the argument is like, I find it weird calling this hand holding. The point of the game isn't jump on the correct ledge. This is just accessibility. If it's accessibility, then make it an option. Don't make it standard. And then it goes even further, and this gets dumber and dumber, like I said before. Every time you delve in any further into any of these conversations with these self-righteous fuckwits, it just gets stupider and stupider. So then a guy is like, This is dumb. It's needed. Can you imagine just jumping into every ledge you see, hoping this is the one you can grab? So you mean like Dying Light 1, where you could literally jump and climb everything in the entire game from start to finish? You mean like that? Yeah, I imagine that's dumb, and that wouldn't make for a good game, right? No one bought Dying Light 1 for sure. So, again, I don't mean to sound like a grumpy old conservative or something, but this is where we're at now with gaming, that people are literally so fucking stupid that they would rather be told every second of the way in every game that they put into their console or boot up on their PC or whatever, where to go, what item to pick up, what button to press, what the solution to a puzzle is, or you know, what buttons to press when you're dodging an enemy attack, or what button counterattacks or whatever. That's just, apparently that's what gaming has become. People don't give a shit about the challenge. They don't care about being good at a game. They just want to play the game and, you know, see the pretty colors and the cool animations and stuff. And I understand that to an extent, but when you're literally arguing against having to figure out which box is actually breakable, when it's clear from the beginning which box is breakable. And again, another digression, I 100% guarantee you, when this game releases next Friday, it is going to have a tutorial, and it's going to tell you explicitly which boxes can be broken. The fact that it wasn't in the demo is probably only because it was a demo and not the real game. I can guarantee you, when the game comes out, because this demo is the very first playable section of the game, at least based on the old game, they are going to give you a tutorial, and they're going to say, hey, shit with yellow marks on it is breakable or interactive or climbable or whatever. That's going to be the case. I guarantee you, I will eat my hat on video if it doesn't happen. I'll give people a choice of which hat. I'll show a video of my mini hats. Anyway, the point here is ultimately every single AAA video game that comes out doesn't have to use the exact same design ideas. And that's funny to say, because if you think about indie games, you know, there's obviously like a million copy pasted platformers and shit like that. But specifically, I'm talking about AAA games and all games in general just don't need to be doing this anymore. And if they do feel the need to do this, then please, it needs to be an accessibility option, and instead of being forced. Truly, make it an accessibility option that can be enabled or disabled or customized. And then, because every fucking RE game connects to the internet anyway through RENet to gather stats, just like every other modern game, then show us the stats. Prove that people are too stupid to break boxes on the, or, you know, in the circumstance that people have those settings disabled. Prove it. I want to see the proof, because people keep claiming that the game testers said, or, you know, the QA team or whatever, the developers said in playtesting, people were repeatedly not finding the boxes and breaking the boxes, etc. So that's why they enabled it by default. I want proof on that, because, again, another guarantee that is bullshit, and everyone knows it's bullshit. So join me next time. I'm sure it won't be very long before someone else says something stupid, or a developer does something that pisses everyone off. So when that happens, I will be here making a video a week late. Oh, to be fair, I made this video a week ago and it's taking forever, so that's why it's only coming out right now.